But I'm going to leave it over now to Martin Kvale and Oda Tilset, who are going to talk about shouting across borders. Please take it away. And a big round of applause.
Thank you. This is going to be a talk about audio, but we're also going to talk about something that is kind of important to us and not that much talked about, which is how it is to work with others when you are a small auxiliary part of a giant production.
Yeah, so we're not really going to speak that much about audio work. It's more about collaboration and working across borders internationally and across disciplines.
Well, a few of the things we will talk about is how we work with teams on a national, international level. We'll brush a little bit about how work has changed since the pandemic and maybe how it will continue to be different. And we will also talk a little bit about why we decided to make a team and make a company around what we do and the benefits of how this affects other people that we work with. And have a few examples that kind of highlights this.
Yeah.
At the end, there will also be a Q&A, which will make sure that if anyone has any audio questions, you can, of course, ask it then.
Yes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so, Martin.
Oda.
Yes. Who are we? Well,
I'm a sound designer, primarily. I worked in the games industry for about 9 or 10 years. I've done a bunch of games, a lot of Scandinavian games, Among the Sleep, Townscaper, Bad North, Gunner, some Dutch games, Hidden Folks, Manifold Garden from America, Genital Jousting from South Africa, and a few Australian mobile games as well in the far distant past. I describe myself as pretty chaotic and strange and weird, so I basically do sound design mostly by experimentation. And with the time we have for projects, that's well suited and very fun. So that's what I like to do. A few years ago, I was here to talk a little bit about how it was to be a digital nomad and how to travel a lot. And I still enjoy that a lot. And because of the pandemic, haven't been able to do it that much. But it's been very fun to be in Oslo with Oda and also having a company with our fellow compatriot, Ali.
And yes, my name is Oda. I have been in game audio for about 3 years now, so a lot less time than Martin. But yeah, I do both music and sound design. I also did a deep dive into AI-generated music and stuff about a year ago. I had a talk at GDC and stuff about that. I am CEO at Knock Knock, which is our company that we have with Ali as well. She's in Copenhagen. And Martin thinks I'm structured and efficient.
It's true. I think that's also the kind of nice thing about having a company together is like you do the best things that the other person is not good at. But it didn't always used to be that we work together. We both come from a freelancing background, and that has been definitely there's a bunch of really fun things about being a freelancer. We both have worked with a bunch of different projects, and to be able to have that freedom and to kind of manage your own time as a sound designer, it is really fun, and it also means that you get to work with a lot of different projects over a lot of different countries and people and different cultures.
Yeah, so you have a lot of different hats. Like for some projects, maybe you only do the sound design. Others, maybe you do sound design and a lot of implementation. Maybe there's music. And mixing the game, it's a lot of variety from project to project. Sometimes you just send off your audio files and let the developers deal with them. And that can be a bit scary, but also it's nice to maybe not have to spend all that time on implementation and stuff. And also because you have a lot of different projects, you get a lot of variety. Like maybe on a given day, you could be working on a children's game with really cute animals, but then for a few hours you're working on a horror game as well. So you can kind of bounce a bit between how you feel, as long as there aren't a lot of meetings and stuff, of course.
It's also a very good thing that you get to pick and choose a little bit, and over time kind of figure out also who you kind of get to work with and who you like to work together with. A very good benefit is that we can do a project, and at the end of the project, you can also kind of imagine that this was a good company to work with. We do want to work with it further. This was not a good company to work with, but it was nice to still have the project. So over time, we actually, as a freelancer, get to definitely dip our toes in many different ponds and kind of make our own reality and career as enjoyable and creatively fulfilling as possible.
But there are also a few cons to working freelance, because when you have a lot of different projects, it can be a bit difficult to schedule your time, especially when things, as it happens, projects get delayed, and then maybe the plan that you had for the next 6 months, where you thought you were going to finish this one project this month, and then you would start on the next one, but then that other project got delayed and got the same deadlines and stuff as the other one, but then those got delayed again, and suddenly you have 3 projects with deadlines in the same week.
It is pretty typical, because I think especially if we're working with small teams like we do, there's definitely like windows that are better for small independent teams. Typical like autumn or spring, and there's like definitely time around Christmas where a lot of AAA games are coming out. And this is of course not true all the time, but there will usually be some gaps each year, and everyone will at some point figure out this is when we need to release the game.
Yeah, and also in Norway, where we have the Norwegian Film Institute applications for money, government funding, there's always a bunch of demos that have to be ready for those. So for example, last week, or this week actually, I had 2 deadlines for demos that had to be done in the same day. So there's a lot of overlaps, and that means you have kind of unpredictable workloads, and having many hats means that it's likely that it's going to get messy at times.
Yeah, and it's also very tiresome, to be honest. The thing when you have a lot of projects and a lot of things that need to be done in a very short amount of time, it's required you to do a lot of context switching, which is basically going from this game, this kind of thing means this, and when we do UI sounds or when the action sound's going to happen, it's going to feel like this, because the narrative of the story is that it should feel bad to do this thing or nice to do this thing. And going from this project where you have this universe in your head all the way over to the other one where this is a different project, you're doing this thing, you're picking a flower, you're going to spread it to the wind, and from then on you're going to fly onwards, and what does that mean? What should it sound like? What should the atmosphere be like? There's a lot of these kind of things that when you do work with different projects, you need to inhabit these worlds like mentally. And especially for like these times when suddenly you have 2 or 3 deadlines, to do the job well and to do this kind of proper work, it's quite tiresome. So that is definitely the bad thing that happens with when it comes to freedom. And
being freelancer, working on your own, and having to deal with everything, it can be a bit overwhelming at times.
Yeah, and it's actually so that society is not really, at least in Scandinavia and probably quite a few other countries, it's kind of made for working in a company and not being a freelancer. In Norway especially, and that's kind of all we can speak about. It's hard, and you don't get many benefits. You don't get unemployment if something happens.
Pension and everything, you have to keep track of that as well on top of all your other work. So it's a lot to deal with.
Yeah. So yeah, at worst, we can also feel like we're a bit of a lone wolf. And whereas it can be fun, it can also means that you're a little bit exposed to the environment, you say.
Yeah, and that's why we decided to create a company. So yeah, that's a picture of us with Ali, who is our 3rd wonderful person, and we love her a lot. She is amazing. And she's American, so we're actually kind of an international team, even though we're based in Oslo.
But she lives in Denmark, which is also like, then we got all of Scandinavia, kind of, because Denmark is a little bit weird to us. We don't understand what they're talking about. So we sent one of our employees to kind of learn Danish and understand the Danish culture. Yes. So far, we haven't learned much except for beer. A lot of beer.
And cheap kebab.
Yes.
But yeah, this is what we do. Sound design, everything audio, really. Sound design, music, voice casting, and dialogue editing. That's kind of Ali's specialty. And implementation. So whatever a game needs in audio, we can handle it pretty much.
And it also means like basically we can involve each other pretty much simpler. And the hat wearing that we need to do, like we need to hire a voice cast, we need to do a voice casting, we need to edit dialogue, we need to do composition and implementation. We can actually assign this to the other people that are very, very good at these specific things. And having a company, it means that when the people hire us as the company, we can manage that the funds that we're giving as our own, and it's easy to involve each other because we are all part of the same thing.
Yeah, we could work more dynamically as well. Like if a project suddenly needs a lot of work, we can actually go at it, all three of us, if needed, or we can just be one person working part-time if that's all that's needed. So it's really nice.
Less paperwork for that exact little thing.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of benefits to having a company because we have a team. And also with the benefits of being an employee instead of being a freelancer is that we get pension. We have NAV in Norway, which is the labor and welfare administration. So we have the benefits from that. We have the paid vacation and sick days that we don't have as a freelancer. And as we said, we can offload each other and work dynamically on the projects. And also, you're not financially liable. So if the company goes under, we're still going to be fine. It's not going to affect us personally. So a lot of benefits. Only thing is there's more paperwork, but I'm 100% fine with it. It's worth it.
Oda is doing the most paperwork, unfortunately, but it's also something we're going to switch a little bit about. And the cool thing about being dynamic is also at some point, if one of us is having more work than the others, we can switch around with who does what exactly. So it is a very nice thing. We feel like having a company, the way we run it, it's kind of all about structuring us to be able to work with a bunch of interesting and fun projects and having the freedom we do as freelancers, but also having this kind of stability that you get from working in a company that quite few sound designers and composers, I feel, have.
Yeah, it's nice to actually have a team, and even though we're not working at the same project at the same time always, you still have coworkers that you can bounce ideas off of and have a bit of a community, I guess, even though it's very small. And also we're all owners, so we are at the same level. There's no boss on top, so that's also very nice.
But Oda.
Yes.
We actually came here to not really talk about that too much, but we felt it was important to talk about kind of so you get an idea of who we are and where we come from and why we kind of made this the way we like to do things. And it is an important point to go through until we go to the next point, because we are here to talk basically about how it is to work with other cultures and other borders and other kinds of people and other kinds of disciplines.
Yes.
And the good thing about working with audio for games is that usually when you have a game production, audio is one of the more likely positions to be part-time. This is partly due to that we have a lot of power to do a lot of really cool stuff in a very short time, absolute power to do that. And it also means that it's mostly not needed to have us in for half a year to make footstep sounds when you're just prototyping a demo. It also means that because of that, we do get to have a lot of different projects because we have a bunch of off time on each and anything we do.
Yep.
And through that, we then have a lot of experience now, we feel, with how we are working with both Norwegian, Scandinavian, and international and outer-worldly game companies.
Yes, it allows for a lot of travel, really, too, and to get to experience new things. So, yeah, should we just move on?
Yep.
Yeah.
So the theme is about working with others.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we're here to talk about.
Yep.
Not audio.
And we felt that it's a really good thing because it's also working across borders is the subject of this year, of this conference. So we felt that we could also make a lot of blip-plops and bling-blomps and sounds on the stage and talk about how we find the sounds or how funny is really fart sounds and the step sound implementation.
But this felt more relevant.
Yes.
Yes. So we'll just start out talking a bit about what it's like to work with people locally. So in Norway, pretty much. Some of the people that we work with are actually in Oslo, where we live ourselves. You work for Krillbite, not just part-time, actually an employee.
Yeah, I'm part of Kvale by Studio, who did Mosaic and Among the Sleep and the Plan and Sunlight. So we're basically doing very sad games, which is very Scandinavian, I think, because we get sad during the winter. But the good thing is we are all based in the same city as the company, so going there and working from there and having a small studio space, it's a very valuable thing to be able to see people in the eye, and like kind of we can't really do now because of this glaring light. But you have this communication that is not over Skype or TeamViewer or Discord or Slack or Trello or Asana or what you have it. And it's basically just, it makes it very easy to do a lot of these things that are a little bit hard when you're a sound designer, which is like basically the communication thing. And what we find is kind of left of the whole, as like an issue and a problem, or at least like a challenge, is always the part about how to communicate with people across disciplines.
Yeah, because in general, at least to me, it seems like people have a pretty good idea of how to talk about things that are visual, because people are used to talking about what things look like and colors, etc. But when it comes to audio, a lot of people, they don't really know how to talk about it. And that is something that we always have to be very conscious of when we are speaking with other people on the teams that we are working with. To make sure that they understand what we are saying, and that we understand if they say that they want a sound to feel a bit more red, what does that mean? We have to try to understand more. And that's more of the cross-discipline thing. It's probably one of the bigger communication, I guess, challenges that we have.
And then we go outside of our Oslo into a bit further. Like for instance, we do work with Hamar a lot, which is similar to Kvale. We have a good game center. We have the Hamar Game Collective. They have a local educational thing. We have very good politicians. So it's a very good kind of thriving ground for indie teams to be settling and working.
Yeah, and it's easy to visit them by train. It's like a 1.5 hour train ride. Very beautiful along the Mjøsa, which is a nice lake. And since we know a bunch of people there, it's easy to just go there, work for a day, crash on the couch, and work another day, and then go back to Oslo. And we've had a really good and intense and effective work week, almost in just 2 days. But other than that, it's mostly on Slack or Discord, and it varies a lot from like team to team, if you have meetings at all. At least in my experience, I've never ever had a single meeting with any of the people that I've worked with in Hamar, and everything has been fine. Whereas in Oslo, even though we are closer, we're still having more meetings. So it depends on the company and the people.
It's also very nice that it is localish in that sense that we have also share a culture and language. There's no kind of language barrier. There is a bunch of dialects. For anyone who speaks Swedish, in Norway we have a lot of weird dialects as well. But it is mostly fine. And we are kind of, at least that's something we can easily learn to deal with. And we all like beer, and we all like sauna and skiing with stuff on our feet. That's also very funny. We do that. So it's we understand each other for a bunch of things.
Yeah.
But again, like, the challenge here is how to communicate across disciplines.
Yeah, and also not all the people are very talkative, and that can be a challenge too.
Yeah, that's a very uniquely Scandinavian thing, I feel. If you go outside of Scandinavia, then people are usually better at talking.
Yeah.
But they are not really here in Norway. So, like for instance, we love working with Hyper Games. I worked with them before on a game called Mørkeredd. But God bless their Norwegian hearts, they're very, very introverted, so that...
but the thing is, I don't really notice that. With me, it's fine.
Yeah, I come in and I'm a bit loud, and that scares them, so they become silent for an hour or two. So I need to sit in the corner very quietly until they get used to me, and then we can start talking and having a meeting. And of course, that's a little bit of how you understand how to work with different teams, right? When you come into a room and you know how to communicate with people, you save a lot of time and energy.
Yeah. And then we have the international edition. So for this, usually we would probably go and actually travel to the places where people are working from and visit and work together. Because most of the time it's over Slack or Discord, having video calls and stuff. So going and actually visiting for maybe a week or more to work actually together is really nice. But of course, there's some issues like travels. It costs money, it takes time. There's might be visas that you have to fix. And also another thing is like if you're making music, the music rights and copyright stuff is different in different countries, and that's also something that you might have to navigate, which can be a bit difficult. And also time zones, of course, because we are lucky that there's a lot of people in these Europe time zones, but also if we're working with people in the US or somewhere in Asia, it could be more tricky to schedule meetings.
Yeah, for instance, I worked on a project that's finishing out now, where we had 2 Monday scrums, one for Eastern and one for Western. It is a little bit weird. You can join all of them, and as a sound designer, it was quite useful to be in both. But it is weird to do like the Monday meeting twice in a day. But that's also part of the challenge and part of the fun, really.
Yeah, I also worked on a game with some people in New Zealand, and which was like for a while it was 10-hour difference, and then it was 12-hour difference for a while as well while I was working with them. And if I was lucky, I would wake up early in the morning and have an email from them, and then I would reply to that email the second I woke up, still sleepy, send it off, get a response in the next maybe 15 minutes, and then they would be gone for the rest of the day. I would not be able to get much feedback. So that was pretty tedious, and also setting up meetings was pretty much impossible because they would be off work after I woke up.
And this is a very interesting thing about working with different time zones, different teams, is that there's a bunch of challenges that allows for this thing to work well. You need to then be much more self-sustained. If you're interfacing with programmers and the designers, the challenge is that you want to condense everything you need to know into a very concrete list of things. But otherwise, you are pretty much left alone for the whole workday. So the more you are actually good at making your own decisions and don't need to ask people about things, the more valuable you actually are to that project. For a bunch of projects, I worked on a game which basically were primarily based in England. And we found out that the only people we can have outside of Euro time zones, they need to be able to just make the things and put them into Unity and test them and make them proper. And if they're doing an animation, they have to be able to implement it in an animator. And they have to test it in the game and send it off with a good description so everyone else can kind of know about it. Because otherwise, it would just take way too much time and like wasted time. Because iterations are very choreful, especially if there's like a delay. So the less time you kind of have with this delay of iterations, the more efficient and less frustrating it will be for team members. Yeah,
and I think also for this, it's very important to not be afraid to ask questions at the very beginning when you're starting to work together, even if you feel like it's a very stupid question, because each team has and each game has a very different workflow. So just asking about, okay, how do you want me to do this thing? Even though it's a super basic thing, just ask right off the bat so that you're not potentially doing things slightly wrong and then you have to change everything later just because you assumed or was afraid. So asking questions early on is always a good thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's kind of like a cross-discipline thing really too.
Yeah. It's actually, when we wrote this talk, we also got to this kind of funny realization that we hadn't thought of before, but because we did want to talk a bunch about how different it is to work with different cultures. But to be honest, what we sort of ended up finding out through working on this is that like culture across countries and borders and nations and world parts, it's not that important. It's actually a lot more about professional cultures.
Yeah.
And that is a kind of interesting observation that mostly work culture internationally are fairly similar and relatable. And for the things that are different, yeah, it's just to ask and find out quickly.
Yeah, also especially because the way that people communicate is usually more different than their cultural backgrounds. Like the way that people communicate in Norway versus how they communicate in the Philippines is kind of different. And also with British people is very different from Norwegian people. So yeah, that's almost...
A very concrete example with that is I think in Norway it's sort of like this kind of very well-known thing that whenever you hire people from England, this is a very concrete example, right? And there's probably like some kind of these hacks between all different nations and borders, is that the work culture in England is much more direct than in Norway. So when a Norwegian boss approaches an English worker and says like, hello, would you mind looking at this? They will ask in such a way that it's very hard to understand that it actually is a request. It's more like maybe a suggestion or maybe like a comment or anything like that. But we know that from the people we worked with, it can create a bunch of friction, because then after a while the boss will be frustrated. Why haven't this person done it? It will go up to the person and say like, hey, where's the thing? And the person will then feel bad about like not having done the work and not having really understood that they were supposed to do the work. And then the process could repeat itself unless you actually catch it and do like a little reflection of what happened here.
Yeah. And then that year edition. For me, a lot of things were pretty much the same because I was used to working from home already. Actually, for me, it was more of a change just this past year after we got our office space for Knock Knock. So I actually started working not from home during the pandemic, which is kind of the other way around from what most people have experienced, I guess. But one of the biggest things that I noticed, especially with this one team that I've been working with, is that the different degrees and timing of lockdowns was really having an effect on how it was to work with other people. Because in Norway, we never really had Oslo was pretty strict lockdown for a while, but we never had any curfews, and it was fine. It was boring and a bit miserable at worst, but it was never super horrible and incredibly strict in that sense, I think. Whereas other places, they would have curfews, and the bank, everything would be closed, and like in countries where you don't have access to the bank over internet, then suddenly payments would be delayed, or because the bank was closed all of a sudden. And there's a lot of different things like that to deal with, and also like seeing how the government in other countries where you have friends that you're working with are dealing with things, and feeling a bit helpless because you wish you could just send a vaccine to the people that you're working with in the mail. So that they can get their shots, but there's no way you can do that. And then you see your own country and the vaccine rates are just going up. It's been frustrating and sad to see that. And also another thing is like celebrating releases or awards together. For me, last year was the first year that I had any releases for games that I was working on. I had 4 or 5 games released last year. I had never got to celebrate any of them with any of the teams, not even the ones in Norway, because everything was locked. And also awards. We had a nice get-together for the Norwegian awards, but it was not with any of the teams that I was working with. That was a bit sad.
Yeah, and that is definitely like a thing that I think the hardest thing, again, with working with many projects is that whole thing that, you're celebrating with someone, but if you're not there in person, for you it's kind of like just Tuesday or Wednesday, and the day after you have to do these other things and these other meetings because you have 3 other projects that also have deadlines. So just kind of for the mental health, it's very important to finish something and feel that you're finished, and to not be able to have that, it makes it like a little bit harder to kind of feel happiness about what you do and feel closure and feel that you can kind of let go and relax a little bit. Let's go to the next one, because we have some examples of just projects of how we work and how it has been. And all of these are international, but we're going to start with a very easy one, which is a fairly released game called Townscaper. And we're starting with this because it's sort of like it's the plankekjøring we call in Norway. It's like the plank, the pretty easy one when talking about how to collaborate with people. It's made by a solo Swedish game developer, and it's Scandinavia. We have worked before. It is borders, but we also didn't really need too much work. The publisher is Swedish, And in general, it was a pretty short game. So the communication was done in bursts, the collaboration was done in bursts, and all in all, even though everything was pretty much done in COVID, didn't really notice too much of it. We didn't really get to celebrate when it came out, but probably we'll have a beer, or maybe even had one yesterday or the day before. It's a bit hard to tell, but it's a good example of just this is what we could say, like would practically be like working with someone in Norway, because as long as you're in Scandinavia, you don't really notice the borders or cultures, and you can pretty much also speak the same language, except for in Denmark, which we don't know what to say.
And then Pot, which I'm working on at the moment, it's a Filipino cooking game where you have recipes that you can follow if you want. You can also just take a bunch of stuff and make whatever you want. So it's a game where they want to like get the flow of Asian cooking, where you just take like approximately this much, and I want some garlic in there, so I'm going to put in some garlic. And like the food looks so delicious. All the models that they're making, I get hungry when I'm working on it. But they also have social media platform inside the game that has social commentary on stuff that's happening in the Philippines, which has been really interesting for me, because I've gotten a lot more insight into what the Philippines is like. I didn't really know that much about the Philippines before working on this. And they also have a music player with Filipino music, and a podcast in there as well that we recorded some episodes for with the dev team. So I actually had like 3 hours where I sat down and had a talk with my fellow devs about food, like Filipino food versus Norwegian food, and music, a lot of different stuff. And they were very impressed by berries, that we have a lot of berries in Norway. I never really thought about that before, but strawberries and stuff was a lot more exotic to them than I would have imagined. Especially seeing like they have, I don't know how many different types of bananas, and I'm super fascinated by that, because here you just buy banana, but they have like, no, you have like 50 different kinds. The team is mostly based in the Philippines, and one of the most interesting about this game for me has been that I've been working with chefs. We had a team of chefs that created the 100+ recipes in this game. There were people working on podcasts, news article writers, a lot of different stuff that I never thought about, but it's really cool. They really went deep into getting everything correct and good here. And also the communication for this project has been really interesting, because since most of the team is Filipino, they have been speaking a lot in Filipino, both in the Slack and also during the meetings. Sometimes I would sit there, I would hear an English word, like maybe someone said shader, and then 5 minutes or a few words later I hear number, and then a little bit later, a bunch of Filipino, and then screen. I was like, okay, I think we're still talking about the trailer, but I'm not sure. But because of this, I got really curious. I love languages, so I actually went and did a bit of a dive into Filipino grammar and words and stuff, so that because I could see these words keep popping up in the English messages. Like at the end of sentences, they would often put lang. So I was like, I think I need to know what lang means. And it means just or only. So it's like, oh, okay, now I know this. And sige means okay. So sometimes if people say, oh, okay, sige, okay, sige, they say that a lot. So it's like, okay, I know. And also, there's some words that are kind of the same, or you pronounce it the same, and they also have a lot of foods that are, like, for example, the picture here in the corner was finally able to find some Filipino food in Oslo at a food festival, and the purple thing there is called halo halo. So there's a lot of different examples where they have just one word that they repeat, and that's like the name of the dish. And kanin means rice in Filipino, but it means rabbit in Norwegian. So I figured kanin must be like a rice bunny, and they love that. So I noticed there's a lot of things like that, and we've had a lot of bonding over food thanks to this game. As I said, like I was desperate. I really, really wanted to find some Filipino food because we had this small celebration. They wanted to send me some money so that they wanted to buy me some food, basically. And I was like, okay, I'm going to find some Filipino food because we were celebrating this small thing. But there are no restaurants in Oslo or in Norway, I think, that have Filipino food. So I was kind of frustrated by that, but then we stumbled across this food festival just a few weeks ago where they actually had a Filipino stand selling a lot of the desserts that we have in the game. So, of course, I had to buy it, and it was really delicious. The purple thing is like a rice pudding thing with ube, which is a yam that they use in everything. So that was really exciting to finally try it. Yeah, for this game, I'm doing sound design and implementation. Yeah, it's a great game to work on.
Yeah, and there's kind of a little funny thing when we work on something that it's, when we work internationally, we're doing these things about concepts and things that we don't really know or are familiar with. So everything from basically food culture that we have no possibility to try, to deserts and sand. Norway is very, very wet and not very dry. So I worked on this game called Sable, which recently got released, and it's a game about a young protagonist that is having this ritual of adulthood where she's going to find out who she is, what she wants to do. And it's definitely like in the same vein of Breath of the Wild, with strong inspirations from French comic book artists from the 70s, 80s, and Ghibli and Ico, if anyone has played that. And we did actually manage to go to a desert, which was very nice. It was pre-pandemic, and I think this is an interesting kind of team to talk about, because the way this team has gone is that we did stuff a bunch, and we established a lot of really good routines pre-pandemic. And basically, we worked across a lot of different cultures and countries and disciplines, and even pan media. We worked amongst others with Japanese Breakfast, who is a pop musician, singer-songwriter, multiple book writer almost, that made music for the game, which was her first kind of big collaboration, where she was not also the person who decided everything. So we had that. We had writers from all across the globe. We had mostly a team centered in England, but also all of them had several different backgrounds from different parts of the world. Like, for instance, also the two people who basically made up the core part of the game. One was Greek Cypriot, Swedish Finnish. The other one was Norwegian British. Which was pretty funny, and we were mostly in the Euro time zones. But the difficult things that happened here was basically before the pandemic, we would go up and meet, like either in America, where we would do a work-a-thon and like have a lot of planning. We did like a cabin trip in Norway because we have a lot of cabins in Norway. So we could have like a week of focusing, and or just meet up in England and kind of work from their shed. Which is very valuable, because when you're working with people and you kind of figure out the best and most efficient way to work, and you get to do that, that is definitely speeds up things. And then we can kind of rather work with audio in bursts rather than in drips. But then the pandemic came, and I think definitely Sable was very impacted by that, because of the way we worked and the way they had an office and they had the collaborators that came into this office and worked. We couldn't do this anymore. So suddenly they had to change a lot of routines that they had kind of perfected and improved upon into this very different setup that wasn't very ideal. So for the last 1.5 years until the release, a lot of the work, instead of kind of working on the game, was more about figuring out how we would work more efficiently when we were apart. And that definitely caused like a bunch of bugs, a bunch of stress, a bunch of delays, and a bunch of communication problems. And to be able to kind of have done the whole game and seeing that the difference in how to work with someone before and after, It was a good and interesting experience. But we did figure it out in the end. So basically, in conclusion, I think we talked a lot about communication in this talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and communication can't be overstated. I think before I started doing sound design, I imagined it being like, I get to sit and make music and sounds all day, and it's going to be fun. But in reality, like a lot of the work is documentation. A lot of the work is meetings. A lot of the work is traveling and sitting next to each other and basically having this thing that we're working this together. Because games, more than I think any other media, is very based on like a number of people getting together with many different hats and somehow making it working. I feel like a lot of people are just basically saying that a game is made at all is just a very remarkable thing. And but I definitely think that as long as you have the communication aspect going, you have a
very good
strong chance.
Foundation for a good game.
Yeah. Do we have another slide?
Yeah, we basically have to adapt and evolve all the time because all the projects are very different, just like tofu, which I love. But yeah, we're very lucky that we found each other in Oslo and could have a company together that is still working super well. Because it alleviates a lot of problems, makes things a lot easier to navigate the projects, and if one gets sick, we can help each other, and it's also not a problem for the people that we're working with, so it's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Is there any questions? I believe there is a microphone there, so
It
if
could
anyone...
be anything, if it's sound or music, whatever.
Hello,
Hey.
person.
All right, so I have plenty of questions actually. So I can start with you. This is for you, Oda. Mostly, like, did you start with sound design or music, and how did you get into the other one, and how do you find a balance between it?
Well, I actually started wanting to work with music only and for film and games. But while I was studying, I realized that because I studied music design and we had some like assignments where we did a bit of sound design related stuff as well. And I realized that that was a lot more fun than I thought. And then I started looking more into games and how that works and saw that, okay, there's a lot of problem solving. You get to create all these systems and stuff. And I thought that was really cool. So then I just felt like, nah, I don't want to do film anymore. So I just went to, okay, it's all games. And yeah, that's kind of how it went. Then I decided the best thing I ever did was going to this game audio beer meetup in Oslo in February 2018, I think, where I met Martin. And yeah, it's just good. From that point, Martin helped me out and got things started, kind of. And yeah.
She didn't really need much help. She's kind of like, if you throw her into the deep end of a pool, she will just float and swim very well. So it's also very nice when we made the company that to know that someone knows how to swim. That sounds a bit brutal. We started with a very shallow pool first, so no drowning.
Yeah, and regarding the company, so let's say you start a company, and what now? Like, how do you get to your first project? And more important, how do you reach like half across the globe for a project?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I think we are... it's for Oda.
We were in a pretty good position to begin with because before we started, I mean, Martin has the biggest network you could think of almost. So it's a very good starting point. And also both Ali and I also had been to a lot of different conferences in 2019. So we did know a bunch of people and already had worked on some projects. So we had a good foundation to get things started. So that was getting projects was never really an issue for us to begin with. Yeah. So we were in a pretty privileged position.
Yeah, no, we definitely had a lot of luxury kind of being able to travel to conferences like GTC and to be able to attend different conferences and also have games to talk about that we've done. And it's definitely like from a point of privilege, but to be able to go to somewhere and be able to talk to someone and they recognize what you've done before, it's a very good business card. But it's also just we've also done our fair share of game jamming and gone to different events where we participate and be creative. And again, like this also relates back to the whole thing of why we have a big contact network and why we meet a lot of people is that we do work with a lot of different projects. So whenever we make a good impression, we have a lot of potential good impressions that we can make because we do interact with a lot of different people across. So so definitely like to be a sound designer musician person or a voice editing person. It's like you kind of automatically get to meet a lot of people once you start doing it. But of course the tricky thing is getting in for the first. But at least for us, traveling and using funds to just travel.
Being places, because if you kind of have to be at the right place at the right time, I guess. But you're never going to be at the right place at the right time if you're not there. So.
And at least in Norway, I know there's a bunch of funds that is kind of like for students and people in this startgropa in the beginning, where they can kind of get some additional funding for going to conferences. There's a bunch of good things for going to GDC, for instance.
Yeah, that's how I went there. I applied for one of the IGDA things, and I got in, and that got to know a bunch of people there. So just checking if there's a conference that you want to go to, just check, is there a student thing for this, or can I apply for a fund from the government to go to the conference, etc. It's a really good idea.
Thank you. And one last question on a different topic. So let's say you're going to make music for a new project and you just sit down like, yes, let's go. And how do you get past when you get stuck like with forced creativity or a creative block or something?
Often just sit there and be frustrated with my work and hate everything I'm doing for a while. And then I'll maybe at iteration number 10, I'll start like, okay, this is starting to sound good. It's okay. Sometimes you just have to, sometimes I just listen to something that I know, okay, something like this could work, and I try to kind of replicate that. And when I have that as a base, then it's easier to go off of that. That's quite often what I do if I feel super stuck.
It's also fine to just try random things.
Yeah.
Like if you sit down and think like, I'm going to write 10 stupid things in an hour, and they're all going to be very silly, and I'm never going to use them probably.
Yeah.
But suddenly after like an hour, you're just like, oh, these two things were actually very silly, but they're actually pretty good silly.
Yeah.
I think just if you're stuck somewhere,
just play.
Yeah, just play and be weird and experiment.
Yeah.
That's at least like it's fun.
All right. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else? I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, maybe one more question. And if not, we can all take we have one person. Hey.
Okay, so quick question then. From a, like, okay, so me as a designer and a programmer, what are my do's and don'ts when it comes to working with, perhaps like a sound designer or like composer and stuff? Like, what can I do to make your job easier?
I think communication is very good. We have definitely worked with a bunch of different companies, and some of the best ones is kind of we go in and usually we structure things a little bit differently. But some companies are very good at, like, when we're sort of talking about the game and they're showing us the game, that all these kind of things that we need to get an impression for the game is just ready and there. So it's like here's 4 links. These links take you to like the list and the map of what's going to be. This is the production plan. This is like 5 different videos. This video is from that time, so please disregard the art there, like that kind of stuff. So basically, to have that onboarding thing when you just you can just see from the first mail that I know exactly what this is, and I understand what they want, and I understand what they need.
And providing like concept art, if you don't have anything that's actually ready in the game, at least like something visual that we can see to get a better like impression of what the vibe for the game is, whatever. And also, at least for music, I think it's very good if you have kind of like a playlist or something, some idea of what kind of mood you want, because people have very different ways of describing the same kind of music. So just like having concrete examples is always good. Also for sound design as well, because there's a lot of different approaches. If you want a very stylistic sound design approach, or if you want a more realistic one, It can be hard to know for us. Some people just want you to go in and do whatever, whereas other people have a very specific idea of what they want, and maybe they want that sound to just be pitched up one semitone more, and yeah. So just be specific, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. So anyways, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Oda and Martin. Big round of applause.
Thanks.
We're going to take another break here on the main stage and going to be back at 2 o'clock for a panel. So I'll see you then.